snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books.
Hi guys! So I am here today to do a book review, and the book I'm going to be reviewing is the first one in the Memory, Sorrow and Thorn series by Tad Williams. This one is called The Dragonbone Chair. I actually listened to this, so I didn't read the physical edition because I was at uni and I'd left this back at my house, which obviously I'm back home now, so I have it here. It's quite a huge book, as are most of Ted Williams' books. This one is around 800 and just under 900 pages, so it's quite a chunky one, I must admit. This is a fairly classic fantasy, I would say. It has lots of classic tropes within it, so we have a young boy who is essentially the chosen one in this storyline. He goes on a quest and we follow him on that quest. We also have some interesting elements such as trolls, who are not massively in fantasy. I haven't seen them a lot in the fantasy I've read recently, so that's an interesting quirk that I didn't imagine was going to happen. I would say this is fairly classic. If you don't like classic fantasy, it's probably not for you. If you do, maybe you will enjoy this because it is well written and I did enjoy it overall. This definitely suffers from first book in a series syndrome. It sets up a lot and it spends a lot of time setting up. Obviously, Ted Williams is trying to set up an entire world so that he can have his characters journey around this world, which is great because I love big, expansive worlds, but it takes quite a long time for him to set up this world, and I have to admit about half of this book is quite slow going. It was not hard to get through because it's quite easy to read, but it took a time and you noticed that it was taking a time. I think this is a good read if you like classic fantasy and you're prepared to slog through the beginning, but be aware that it is a slow starter. With that said, I think the second half picked up massively. I think that things started to get rolling, particularly by the end, and I felt that by the end of this book I was very intrigued by what was going to happen to our main characters. I thought there was a lot going on, there was a lot of exciting stuff that was hinted at the next book, and I think it will become a series that gets better as it goes. You guys might remember that I have read some other Tad Williams books in the past. I've actually also read the Otherland series by Tad Williams, which is a sort of more science fiction series than it is fantasy, and I loved that series, but again, the first book in that series I only gave 3.5 stars. The first book in this I'm giving 3, and I think he is one of those people who takes his time to set up a world, but then maybe he just turns it into something fabulous as he goes on, because that's definitely what happened with Otherland. I felt like the first book was really slow going at some times, it was also very confusing and complex at some times, and then the second, third and fourth books were just fantastic. So I'm hopeful that this might be the case with this series as well. We shall have to see. The story itself within this focuses on a young boy called Simon, who is a kitchen boy. He works in a big castle. He doesn't really know an awful lot of people there. He kind of keeps himself to himself most of the time, and he's not necessarily the brightest spark ever. He definitely suffers a little bit from cluelessness and from innocence and naivety, and he doesn't necessarily pay attention to the things that matter as much as he should. So he's an interesting character right from the start. He was orphaned at birth when his mother died, and so he's just been taken on as part of the staff and raised in the castle for all of his life. He's never really gone very far from the castle. I found the beginning scenes that introduced our main character of Simon to be really good, actually. I was quite interested by what's happening, but as the story went on, these scenes just grew and grew and grew, and didn't really go anywhere for quite a while. We have a world within this where magic once existed. It's believed that a lot of people used to have magic, but at the moment we don't really have any characters who have a lot of magic. We have troll characters who come in later, like I say, but we don't have any sort of big magician characters at the moment. We also have a dark character who seems as though they are corrupting the peace within this world. We have a king who is corrupted, who has an advisor who definitely seems like he is dark and nasty. All of this is stuff that we get introduced to very, very early on in the book. We know that the king is not necessarily getting along with his brother. We know that he has this new advisor who's telling him all sorts of things that are maybe controversial. So there's a lot going on in this series which is interesting, definitely interesting, but does take its time to get there. Once Simon leaves the castle, which is fairly obvious that he's going to do that from the start because he's lived there all his life and we know he's going to be the adventurer. Once he leaves, I think things got so much more interesting pretty quickly. He meets people along the way who kind of tell him things that open his eyes to a lot of the world, and he definitely learns a lot once he leaves the castle that he could not have learned whilst being there. I think one of the things to say about classic fantasy is that I'm not often surprised by a lot of the stuff that happens within classic fantasy. I think it is, or it can be, quite predictable at times, and this was definitely a quest. The whole way through, we have our main character going on a quest, going on a journey, and meeting different people and things along the way and fighting off those things. It's kind of like The Hobbit in that regard. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings. All of those classic fantasy ideas are transferred into this. However, I do think it's well written, and I think it's a series I will continue on with, because I'm intrigued by the ending. I think the ending is the bit that really saved this for me, in that it hints at a lot more to come. Even saying that this is kind of predictable doesn't mean that it's a book I didn't enjoy. I think classic fantasy has its own charm for being that predictable, for using the tropes that we know and love, and I really did think it was about time I got back to some classic fantasy, to be honest, because I haven't read any classic fantasy in quite a while, and this is a good series to do that with. On the whole, I would say it's a solid beginning to a series that has potential. Whether it will get there, I'm not sure. We'll have to see in book 2. As a whole, I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. It was very likeable, but it wasn't anything new or innovative or surprising. So just be aware of that if you go into this. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you've read more than just this one in the series, or if you just read this one. Let me know if it gets better. Let me know if you think it gets worse. Like, what do you guys think? Should I continue with this series or not? Because at the moment it's a 3-star read for me. It's kind of middle of the road. But I would love to hear what you guys have to say about it. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in my next review. Bye!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.